This is the Gooshbagz Fantasy Football League podcast with your host, Jason Peck. That's right, you Gooshbagz, it's me. Welcome into week 15 of the 2022 Gooshbagz Fantasy Football League podcast. I am your host, the commissioner, and your favorite semifinalist for the Gooshbagz Fantasy Football League, Jason Peck. That's me. Unfortunately, Brandon was busy tonight, and he wasn't able to join me. Alas, this podcast will be worse because of it. As always, I love having you guys on, and it makes me sad that he couldn't join me. But the show must go on, as I always learned doing theater stuff and everything. I got my buddy with me, Henry. Henry's here. Hey, say hi, Henry. Yeah, he says hi, for those of you who didn't see that. Yes, very much he is very happy to be here. Hey, buddy. All right, well, guys, this week has been a roller coaster for me. Like I said in the chat, I think I maybe regret trading for Christian McCaffrey. Although he has been great. I have no complaints about Christian McCaffrey himself. Just the fact that I gave up Ramondre, who has been almost as good as Christian McCaffrey, and then A.J. Brown on top of that, kind of makes me sad. But, you know, Jalen Hurts is hurt now, so who knows if A.J. Brown is going to be as good as he was. We'll have to see. But speaking of which, let's get into the sad injury news. This week's injuries.
How is he running with a broken leg? Dog, I gotta do this shit. I put the team on my fucking back, though. My leg broke. I don't know how the fuck I'm running right now, though.
You're darn right, boys. We have some unfortunate injuries this week. And the most important ones took place on my team. Jalen Hurts, the number one quarterback of the entire year, has been a monster for me, has a shoulder sprain of some sort. Now, this may not be the worst injury in the world. He is still... it's a possibility that he plays this week, but it's very unlikely. But he might be back next week, depending on if they have the playoffs locked up or not. So we'll have to find out. In other injury news, hang on. I think Henry wants to leave because I'm talking too much. I'll be right back. There we go. Hi, bud. Sorry, boys. He doesn't like noises when I'm, when he's trying to take a snooze, I guess. But I'm here on my big comfy couch this week. I know it's a change of scenery. It's a more relaxed Jason. I told myself I would be relaxed even though my team is falling into the crappa. Speaking of which, Jonathan Taylor had a high ankle sprain this week, and he is out for the rest of the year because there's only like 3 weeks left in the NFL season. So, and the Colts are not going to the playoffs, so Jonathan Taylor looks like he's out for the year, unfortunately. Another player out for the year is Caleb Huntley. He had an Achilles injury. Unfortunately, he is out for the rest of the year and maybe into next year, most likely into next year. Then we've got Tyler Lockett, who fractured his finger, and I think he already had surgery on it. And at best, he might only be out for 1 week. So if you can get through, I don't even know who has Tyler Lockett in our league. But if you are on one of our teams, let's see, let's look it up. I'm gonna look it up right now because I'm curious. Lockett. Oh, Buck. Thank goodness Buck can't play Lockett this week. That is a relief. Whew. Man, that makes me feel better already. So, yeah, tit for tat, bro. Jonathan Taylor, Tyler Lockett, both out. I think that's about even, if not better, in my favor. the way Jonathan Taylor has been playing. So yeah, there we go. That's the injury news for this week. Those are all the big injuries. But yeah. All right, on to the top scorer in the league. And this week, it was kind of a surprise. This guy seemed to be out of the hunt halfway through the year. He did some big trades in the middle just to get some keepers for next year. And this guy is now coming in strong in the playoffs. Team CM Keen. And like I said, if you don't change that name by the time the championship rolls around and you happen to take the victory, I get to pick which name goes on the trophy, and it might be the Pits. So Team the Pits was the highest scorer this week with 128.3 fantasy points.
Alexander Hamilton.
That's right. We got 128 fantasy points from Team CM Keen, and congratulations. I will send you your $10 here shortly. I've also got, yes, I always remember when I do the podcast that I have to send $10. So you'll probably get it either tonight or tomorrow morning. We'll get that off to you. All right, on to the matchups reactions from last week, and these were big ones, boys. Big ones. Last week's head-to-head results. That's right, boys. We are going to start with the first and most important matchup of last week. It was the Christian Crusaders, my matchup, versus Jerry's Kids. This was a tight race, and going into Monday night, Jerry's Kids was up by 6 fantasy points, I believe. You're up, I think it was like 106 to 101 or something like that. So it was close. And I had the Packers defense and Christian Watson versus Alan Lazard. And I was terrified. I didn't know Alan Lazard is, or Romeo Dobbs is coming back. I didn't know if that was going to affect Christian Watson. And then also, you never know with the Packers defense if it's going to be a good day or a bad day. But it ended up being a good day, and the Christian Crusaders won 125.4 to 112.32 fantasy points. That is music to my ears, boys. Music to my ears. We've got the Christian Crusaders with Jalen Hurts leading the way at 34.7 fantasy points before he got his sprained shoulder. I guess that was near the end of the game. It must have been because he scored quite a bit for me. He had 315 yards. He did have 2 interceptions, and he looked bad in the first half, actually. All of his points came in the second half when he rushed in 3 touchdowns. So that's helpful for me, and it really pushed me over the edge here. We have Christian McCaffrey with 22.8 fantasy points, and I can't go any further without mentioning my kicker, Chase McLaughlin, my man, the myth, the legend, 21 fantasy points. And as you guys all know, I've always loved kickers and the variability in the league with kickers. You know, just the luck factor and the chance. It's just one of my favorite things in the entire world. So, yeah, I had plus 15 point differential for the kicker position this week. And that really, I won by 13 points. So, yes, I won because of the kicker position. But to be fair, this was the matchup. This was a revenge matchup because he won with Tyler Bass putting up 20-something fantasy points last time we played. And I think my kicker got me like 3. So it's pretty even now. You just, got it at an inopportune moment in the year. So I feel like we're even now. I don't know about you, Brandon, but that's how I feel. Packers D got me 12, which was good. And then just kind of average games from my wide receivers and a 1.8 from Jonathan Taylor, which really is unfortunate. And then a 2.5 from Dalton Schultz. So those are my duds. Jonathan Taylor, you can't blame him. He had 1 catch for 13 yards, and that was his entire game. He got hurt on that play. It was like the second play of the game. I was watching it, and I was pissed off at that drive because they had multiple attempts inside the 10, and Jonathan Taylor was not out there, and I didn't know why, and I freaked out at you guys about that, and that was frustrating. But we are where we are. And I got to make do without Jonathan Taylor this week. Because I won and I move into the semifinals, so that's a blast. On Jerry's Kids, we had Trevor Lawrence leading the way with 26 fantasy points. We also had Derrick Henry putting up 24.3 fantasy points. And Justin Jefferson also with 24.3 fantasy points. This is why I was nervous. But then we got the Duderino from Mark Andrews with only 4.6 fantasy points. And he had a rough go the last month or so without Lamar Jackson. Since the bye. No, since week 7. He has not scored in the double digits since week 7. That's 10 weeks. No. 8 weeks. 8 weeks he hasn't scored double digits. One of them he was hurt. One of them he was on a bye. Other than that, not making double digits. And that is rough. That's rough for Mark Andrews, especially where you drafted him. And then you got a Duderino from Alan Lazard in the Monday night game. So that was good for me. You only got 1.2 fantasy points from him. So otherwise, that kind of sums it up. We both had good weeks. 125 to 112 is a decent matchup score. We both deserve to be in the playoffs. You were the fourth highest scorer of the week. That includes the guys that had buys. So you were in the top half. But unfortunately, I was the second overall point scorer of the week. So I guess that was kind of the how your life went this year. Let's see, were you the highest points against? No, 1536. Chad was the worst. Ryo was the worst, 1632. So yep. But you were kind of complaining earlier in the year about how you always played against the top scorer, which wasn't exactly true, but you did have good matchups all the way through. So it was a rough year, but you made it to the playoffs, and anything can happen in the playoffs, like my team winning it all, which will happen. It'll happen. The audience likes that. Thank you. All right. On to matchup number 2. We have Team CM Keen versus Team Sir Lancelot. These were the two. This was the other matchup in the quarterfinals for the Gooshbagz Fantasy Football League podcast. As we said, Buck and Neil both had buys this week, so only 2 matchups in the winners bracket and 2 matchups in the toilet bowl. So every game has consequences this week. Or last week and this week, every game matchup that is on has consequences. So yeah, it makes for fun fantasy football, and people hopefully care about it because that's what makes it fun. On Team CM Keen, the dominating CM Keen, we had Kirk Cousins putting up 32.4 fantasy points this week in a huge comeback. Indianapolis Colts were up by 33 fantasy points. Yeah. I think not fantasy points, 33 points, and they lost 39-36. So how embarrassing was that? If only they had gotten a couple extra field goals, that would have been great for my boy Chase McLaughlin, but we didn't. So, that's all right. But 32.4 fantasy points, 460 passing yards, 4 touchdowns, 1 2-point conversion, 2 interceptions. So, lots going on for Kirk Cousins this week. And like I said, we had Ramondre Stevenson also leading the way with 23.8 fantasy points this week. He has been a monster. And then A.J. Brown is your next highest scorer, of course, with 22.6. 9 for 16. 9 of 16. So, 9 catches on 16 targets for 181 yards and no touchdowns. It's insane. It's craziness. And then you had Jerick McKinnon on the bench. That's insane. He had 30.2 fantasy points. That's a monster. But, yeah, I mean, overall, you can't really complain. Everybody was in double digits except Greg Dulcich, who only scored 1.6 fantasy points, and Evan McPherson, who only scored 9 fantasy points, and then your defense, who had 2 fantasy points. So, you can't really complain about that. You had a great week. You were the highest scorer. You got $10, which I will send to you soon. And you move on to the semifinals. So congrats. And it's not against me. It's against Neil. It's against Neil. On the other side, we had Sir Lancelot, who just had some okay games from everybody. He had a good game from Aaron Jones, who had 18.6 fantasy points, but he was your highest scorer. CeeDee Lamb had 16.2. Tua Tagovailoa had 18 fantasy points. And everybody else was in single digits, like a disappointing game from Devontae Adams, who only had 4.8 fantasy points, even though they won 30-24, which is kind of surprising. Was this a Josh Jacobs game? I don't remember. Let's take a look. No, Josh Jacobs only had 12 fantasy points. 3 touchdowns by Derek Carr. Mac Hollins had a touchdown. Keelan Cole had a touchdown. And Darren Waller had a touchdown. So no touchdowns to the old Devontae Adams, but an unfortunate dud game from him. And I don't think there was really any way that you were going to catch up to him. I don't think you could have even possibly scored 128 fantasy points. Oh, I guess if you had A.J. Dillon in the flex, that would have been 16 fantasy points, but that would have been over Devontae Adams, which would have been ridiculous. Yeah, I don't know. 14 from Zeke. Yeah, that would have been tough. But, yeah, so unfortunately, Sir Lancelot knocked out of the playoffs. He's going to play against your boy Brandon Metzler for the 5th place, which is just at this point for draft pick stuff. So nothing too exciting, just for a spot in the standings there. So unfortunately, Sir Lancelot, your playoff run is over. However, both of you can still play for the highest point totals for the next 2 weeks. And if you do, you will get $10, so you can get some money back. So you guys are still have a possibility of getting some money. On to the Toilet Bowl. We had the matchup number 1 from the Toilet Bowl. The Young Hoes versus Saquon UC. Who, this was also semi-tightly, a decently scored matchup here. We had the Young Hoes taking down Saquon UC, 116.56 to 100.78 fantasy points. This was let's see. I'm sorry, I gotta pull this up. This was a good matchup. I don't know why I went away from all the matchups. That was a ridiculous thing. 116.56 to 100.78. On the Young Hoes, we had Josh Allen, as always, leading the charge with 35.86 fantasy points. And he scored a third of your fantasy points, which is absolutely bonkers. We have not quite a third, but close. Pretty close to a third. Devonta Smith, who put up 15.8 fantasy points. And then just overall decent games from your kicker, who had 12, and your defense, who had 13. They had Patriots D, Bill Mayer as your kicker. And then you got a very rare, is that a goose? A very rare goose from Pat Freiermuth, man. He's been good recently, and getting 0 from him is rough, but you were able to push through it. Mainly on the back of Josh Allen. He scored those extra 10 points for you to make up for your tight end not scoring. On the other side, we had Saquon UC with Saquon Barkley, the namesake himself, with 20.5 fantasy points, leading the way for your fantasy team. We have J.K. Dobbins with 13 fantasy points, Jamar Chase with 15.5. Tom Brady only put up 16.5, so that's disappointing for you. He's been disappointing all year for you. It's been really rough starting him. I know. So yeah, you had obviously Tom Ron Bragers, your classic double stack here, and neither of them have been good this year, so it's been frustrating. But yeah, I mean, Joe Mixon just didn't show up. He only had 7.9 fantasy points. We had Chris Olave with 6.8. He's kind of taken a downhill turn ever since, Ritter? Yeah, Ritter started. And then, it's been kind of rough. And now he's hurt, I think, so. And then Gerald Everett only had 6.2 fantasy points. And then Harrison Butker, the kickers. You just couldn't offset the kickers. 10 fantasy points difference in the kickers. But still wouldn't have gotten you the victory, even if it was even. Yeah, it's just a couple of rough games from some key players. And couldn't quite pull through for you. So I apologize. So the Young Hoes are out of contention to get the Sacco this year, which means, and this is a little outdated. Maybe we can think of a new, a new tradition for, the loser of the Sacco, something a little bit different. But yeah, as for right now, we've got drafting an address. If you guys are okay with that, we can continue doing that. However, why can't guys wear dresses? Shouldn't be that humiliating. So we'll think about that. Maybe I'll bring that up at the next yearly rules meeting. But for now, that is the punishment, and that's what we agreed upon at the beginning of the year. So that's what Osequan UC is playing for this week. The Young Hoes, like I said, is just battling for glory and maybe $10 this week. So congratulations to the Young Hoes. The last matchup of the week, the last toilet bowl matchup was More is Less versus Team Go Clifford. We have Go Clifford put up 99.5 fantasy points. This was a tight matchup to More is Less's 95.88. We had no matchups, no teams this week scoring less than 95 points. Which is a good week. Even including all those injuries that happened and whatnot, we still got some good matchups this week. So Justin Fields led the way, right? Oh yeah, for More is Less, he had 23.5 fantasy points. I thought I was looking at it the opposite way. I thought Go Clifford was on the right, and it wasn't. So I was confused. I didn't think he had Justin Fields. So, Justin Fields was 23.58 fantasy points. We had Miles Sanders with a dud of 1.4 fantasy points and Donta Foreman with a dud of 0.9 fantasy points. That's been rough. That's been your rough spot this whole year is running backs. You could have traded me a little bit of running back action, but you didn't really have the depth. You kind of got unfortunate. It was unfortunate with Javonte Williams and Dameon Pierce going to IR and kind of just being less relevant in general. But, yeah, so a rough day from your... running backs. You did have a big game from George Kittle with 23.3 fantasy points. He had 2 touchdowns and 93 yards. So that was good. Actually, that was really frustrating for me as a Christian McCaffrey owner because I thought that Christian McCaffrey was going to have a rough day after George Kittle scored those touchdowns. I was like, oh my God, now the game is just over. I know that usually being up means more running, but at the same time, maybe, they're not going to use Christian McCaffrey because they don't want him to get hurt, blah, blah, blah. But it worked out for both players, so congratulations, George Kittle. But everybody else on your team kind of stunk. So, T. Higgins had 13.8. That's not too bad. And Donovan Peoples-Jones had a surprising 11.1. But everybody else was single digits. We had Daniel Carlson with 7. Rashad White with 4.8. Like I said, your rough running backs were rough. So, not very fun. So, on the other side, Team Go Clifford somehow pulled out a victory with Daniel Jones as his quarterback, putting up 9.9 fantasy points. We had Nick Chubb also with 9.9 fantasy points, and everybody else was good. We had Chris Godwin with 18.3. Adam Thielen with 11. Nick Folk, the kicker, with 13. Man, I don't know how you scored 99. Everybody just scored over 10. Nobody had great games, but you didn't have anybody that put up real stinkers besides the Jets defense. So, yeah, it was kind of lucky, to be honest. I was kind of lucky. But you got some good games and you avoided the toilet bowl. So next week, the toilet bowl. This is something rare that you don't see too much. The toilet bowl is Saquon UC versus More is Less. Two of the more featured members of the Gooshbagz Fantasy Football League podcast, and usually more successful players of the Gooshbagz Fantasy Football League. So very surprising to see these two duking it out in the toilet bowl next week. Or this upcoming week. So that's very exciting. Your matchups could be determined on, Christmas. So that's insane. Like, you could have a great Christmas or a really bad Christmas because you just won the Sacco. So that's a lot of fun. Courts could have both punishments this week if he loses. I guess we could talk about that more in the upcoming matchups. But yeah, there's a lot on the line for Courts this week. He really wants to get that dub. Otherwise, he has 2 punishments. So, very bold moves. Very bold moves need to be made. But yeah, let us move on to the weekly awards this week. And like I said on the chat, I didn't see anywhere where they have the weekly recaps or the weekly awards. It kind of makes me sad. So I kind of went through them myself. I don't know if they are 100% accurate, but I think I looked through them and they look pretty close to good. If they're not good, then I didn't end up doing the overachiever and underachiever because I don't think I was able to see. I might have to go back and look again, but I don't think I was able to see the projections going into last week, so I had no basis on which to make those claims. So I just ignored the overachiever and underachiever category. But the best team of the week was Chad Keen. Like I said, with 128 fantasy points. The worst team, putting up only 95 fantasy points, was Courts. The most efficient manager was James this week. I think he put in his optimal lineup, so congrats to him. The least efficient manager was Neil. He had a bunch of players on the bench, I believe. Let me take a look. He had multiple players on the bench. Yeah, it was tough because he didn't actually play a matchup, but I think as far as who he had on the bench, and maybe he didn't bother setting his lineup, but who he had on the bench versus who he had in the game, I believe that Neil was the least efficient. The highest points in a loss was Brandon. The lowest points in the win was James. The biggest blowout was Chad, and the narrowest victory was James. So congratulations to you all for those weekly awards. That's very exciting. And yeah, that's all fun stuff. Now we're going to move on. I'm skipping power rankings now that we're in the playoffs. Power rankings don't matter. Rankings don't matter. Anything can happen in the playoffs. But for the record, Ryo is still my number 1 in power rankings, so just so you guys know. All right, moving on. Weekly waiver wire studs.
I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass. And I'm all out of bubblegum.
Yes, that's right. We have the waiver wire team that would kick all of our asses. We have Zach Wilson leading off the quarterback position with 19.4 fantasy points. At the running back 1 spot, we got Tyler Algier with 22.1 fantasy points. Running back 2, Marlon Mack with 14.3 fantasy points. We have wide receiver 1, KJ Osborne with 26.7 fantasy points, all in that comeback to the Colts. We got Russell Gage at the running wide receiver 2 spot with 21.9. At the tight end position, we have the monster himself, Jawan Johnson, with 20.7 fantasy points. In the flex, we've got Noah Brown with 19.9 fantasy points. A Dallas Cowboy wide receiver that nobody's ever heard of except for this year. At the defensive position, despite the fact that they gave up all of those points, the Colts defense, who had 2 touchdowns, put up 27 fantasy points. And the kicker on this faded team is Matt Prater with 14 fantasy points. Overall, this team would have scored 186 fantasy points. We got smoked boys. We got a long ways to go. Waivers are, I think, 12-3 for the year, but I'm not 100% sure because I haven't done every week. So we will have to see. But let's move on to the most important semifinal edition of Matchup Predictions. Next week's Matchup Predictions.
I can see the future! I have to stop you from destroying my race! In the future!
We already did that.
I knew you'd do that!
That's right, boys. We've got the matchup predictions for the semifinals. Let's take a look. Let's dive in. In matchup number 1. Oh, man, this is rough. I can't even look at this, guys. Gosh darn it. Matchup number 1, we've got the Christian Crusaders versus Team Buck Nasty 20. And as always, I've got myself going to the finals from this semifinal matchup. Giving myself at least a first or second finish. Most likely a first. But I've got to do it without your boy Jalen Hurts and your boy Jonathan Taylor, who are both hurt this week. So instead I've got Brock Purdy in there. I had Gardner Minshew this morning, and I just couldn't pull the trigger on starting him. They're playing against Dallas. Like, there's no way. Like, that defense is too good. They're going to eat him alive. I've got DeAndre Swift in the running back spot. I've got Christian McCaffrey, who should be good. He had a limited load there on Wednesday this week. Just a maintenance day, I'm sure. We've got Christian Kirk against the Jets and Garrett Wilson against Jacksonville. So both sides of that coin. Like I said, after Thursday night, I'm really going to know where I stand going into the weekend. And if I need to change anything up for a little bit higher upside. So we'll have to see. We've got Dalton Schultz in the tight end spot against Philadelphia. We've got Christian Watson versus Miami. That should be a good matchup. And Chase McLaughlin, my savior, with against the Chargers this week. And the Browns D against New Orleans. On the other side, I'm going against Patrick Mahomes against Seattle. Travis Etienne, who's had a rough time recently, versus the Jets. That's a rough matchup. And Antonio Gibson versus San Francisco. Also a rough matchup. So running back's not looking so great. And Cam Akers against Denver. Running back's not looking so great. We got Jerry Jeudy versus the Rams. That is a decent matchup. We've got Tyreek Hill versus Green Bay, who have been good against the pass. So we'll have to see if they continue to shut down the pass or if Tyreek Hill kind of, takes over. We got Travis Kelce versus Seattle. I'm scared of that Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce stack. That could get you lots of points. And then, of course, Justin Tucker and the Bills D. But I got to have faith in my team. I got to have faith in the Christian Crusaders. We've got this victory going into the championship. Put it on the board. On to matchup number 2. We've got, for some reason, it's got them, it's got these in the wrong order. It should be the playoffs and then the not playoffs. You know what I'm saying? So matchup number 2, we've got the number 3 seed, actually 2 seed, Cooking Some Lamb versus Team CM Keen. Now, CM Keen is projected to win 111 to 103 fantasy points. Let's take a look. Team Keen has Kirk Cousins versus the Giants, Ramondre Stevenson versus Cincinnati. We got Tony Pollard versus Philadelphia. Amon-Ra St. Brown versus Carolina. A.J. Brown versus Dallas. We've got A.J. Brown with a backup quarterback, Gardner Minshew, against Dallas. We've got Greg Dulcich versus the Rams. We've got Keenan Allen versus the Colts. And we've got Evan McPherson against New England and the Commanders. Defense against San Francisco. On the other side of the coin, we've got Cooking Some Lamb, who's got Geno Smith versus Kansas City. That might be a high-scoring game. We've got Josh Jacobs versus Pittsburgh, who has been good recently. We've got Dalvin Cook against the Giants. We've got DeAndre Hopkins versus Tampa Bay. We've got Amari Cooper versus New Orleans. Foster Moreau versus Pittsburgh. We've got James Conner versus Tampa Bay. And Jason Myers versus Kansas City, and the Chiefs D versus Seattle. This is a tough one. I think I'm gonna have to go with Team CM Keen to win this one. I think the matchups on both sides are kind of rough, but the players, I trust the players a little bit more on Team CM Keen. Like I said, they've got Ramondre, they've got AJ Brown, they've got Amon-Ra St. Brown, they've got Keenan Allen. He's got the talent there, and I think that Team CM Keen is going to make it through and take me on in the championship. Let's move on. Matchup number 3 for 5th place. We've got Sir Lancelot versus Jerry's Kids. Now, we've got on one side Tua, Aaron Jones, Austin Eckler, Stephon Diggs, CeeDee Lamb, TJ Hockenson, Devontae Adams, Michael Badgley, and the Ravens D. Versus the other side, we've got Trevor Lawrence, Derrick Henry, Isaiah Pacheco, Justin Jefferson, Alan Lazard, Mark Andrews, Kenneth Walker, and Tyler Bass, and the Vikings D. I'm going to have to go with Sir Lancelot in this matchup. I just think he's got the star power, and yeah, I don't think he's going to lose to Team Jerry's Kids. It might be another week of losing to a high-scoring matchup here, Team Jerry's Kids. So good luck, Brandon, this week. All right, matchup number 4 for 7th place this week. We've got Team Go Clifford versus Team Young Hose. Yes, that's right. And I've got Ryo's team to win because his team is so good. But that's obvious. But let me go through the lineups just to make sure. We've got Josh Allen versus Chicago. We've got Leonard Fournette, Alvin Kamara, Mike Evans, DK Metcalf, Pat Freiermuth, Devonta Smith, and Bill Mayer. Same lineup as last week, but I think this week they get you another victory. So yeah, I guess you won last week, so they will get you another victory this week. Josh Allen versus Chicago is just going to smash. On the other side, we've got Daniel Jones, Nick Chubb, Najee Harris, Terry McLaurin, Adam Thielen, Evan Engram, Chris Godwin, Nick Folk, and the Jets. Yeah, I've got the Young Hose to win this matchup and getting the 7th place match, or the 7th place. It's not a trophy, so 7th place. You get 7th place. And the last matchup, possibly the most significant matchup of this week. We've got the Toilet Bowl, and the loser gets the dress. We've got More is Less versus Saquon UC. On Saquon UC, we've got Tom Brady versus Arizona. We got Prime Saquon Barkley versus Minnesota. We've got Joseph Mixon versus New England. It's his breakout year. Of course, we've got Jamar Chase, again, also against New England. We've got Jalen Waddle, Gerald Everett, J.K. Dobbins, Eddie Pinheiro, breaking out the Pinheiro, and the Buccaneers D. On the other side, we've got Justin Fields starting for More is Less. We've got Miles Sanders, Rashad White, T. Higgins, Donovan Peoples-Jones. We've got George Kittle, a.k.a. George Brittle. We've got Darius Slayton, Daniel Carlson, and the Broncos defense. Unfortunately, for More is Less, it seems like less is less because your team does not have any talent. I apologize, but I believe that the winner is going to be Saquon UC, and the loser is going to be Courts. It has been a lost year for Courts this year. So, unfortunately, I see you taking home both punishments this year, and that's just how it's going to go. So I'm sorry, Courts. I'm sorry. You're the unluckiest this year. You're the unluckiest. But guys, thank you so much for joining me this week. I am so stoked to be back in it. I know I had a rough go of it, and I was a sour puss for a few weeks, but I'm back with a vengeance, with some spirit, with some life, and I'm looking forward to hosting that trophy in Naperville once more, back in its home. It's an OG home where it belongs. So yeah, guys, good luck for those of you, all of your fantasy football matchups. I hope you score well. I hope your opponents score poorly. And guys, enjoy this week. It's been a fun year. Always remember, fantasy football is the greatest, and I love just being able to hang out with you guys and talk with you guys. That's mostly why we do it, because we just, we miss hanging out with each other, and it's a really good way to keep up and bring some competitiveness into it and just enjoy ourselves. So I love you guys. You guys have a wonderful week, and no matter what happens, I will be back next week ready to do the second to last podcast for the year, getting ready, making our way up to the championship, and finishing this thing strong. So thank you guys. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Happy holidays. That's this weekend as well. Enjoy it with your family. Enjoy some football with your family, and just have a great time. All right, see you guys. Adios, amigos.